Guys, unlock American energy, drill, frack, burn coal, embrace nuclear. Put people back to work by no longer paying them more to stay at home. Reform the U.S. Fed, stabilize the U.S. dollar, and go to war. The only war that I will declare as U.S. president will be the war on the federal administrative state that is the source of those toxic regulations acting like a wet blanket on the economy. So I'm not sure I exactly understood Mike Pence's comment, but I'll let you all parse that out. For me, it's pretty simple. That's something a U.S. president can do with focus, and I'll deliver on it.
Let me explain it to you. Vivek.
Even could have sold shares in, that I could have sold shares in before that failure. We didn't. In fact, many people would call that honorable. That was extremely painful to me when that drug failed. So how did I make my money then? Well, it turns out that I worked on a number of other medicines, 5 of which are FDA approved today. One for prostate cancer, another for endometriosis and uterine fibroids, another for psoriasis, another for overactive bladder, another for a rare genetic condition in kids, where 20 kids a year are born with a genetic disease, where 100% of them die by the age of 3. And with treatment, a majority of those kids can live lives of a normal duration. I'm proud of those accomplishments. That was part of how I had success in the world of biotech. Yes, that is how you actually create value and make money without apologizing for it. And what I teach young people across this country is, you know what? You're going to go through hardship. Not everything you do is going to succeed. But hardship isn't the same thing as victimhood. Hardship is what teaches you who you are. That worked for me. And that's what's led me to success, not just with Roivant, which is a nearly $10 billion publicly traded company today, which is the one that I founded and built from scratch, but several other companies like Chapter and like Strive, other successful companies that I've founded since then as well. So I'll be happy to, take my entrepreneurial background and business background toe to toe with anybody else. I'm proud to have done that by the age of 38. And it's one of the experiences that'll allow me to succeed as chief executive of this country as the next president. Another lie that I've sort of been humored by.
Then that actually means you're just racist and you don't know it. If you say, I'm not racist, that means you are racist. If you say all lives matter, that somehow means that you believe that black lives don't matter. If you capitalize the W in white or fail to capitalize the B in black, you're racist. And there is no greater damnation in modern America than to be labeled a racist. So between pledging fealty to this new religion and being tarred with the scarlet R, everyday Americans are choosing to bend the knee. The consequences may be existential for America. This has created a new culture of fear in our country. Fear of losing your job, fear of failing a class at school, fear of becoming a pariah in your own community. And almost every day, somebody new is sacrificed at the altar and excommunicated from civil society for saying the wrong thing. This new culture of fear has completely eroded our culture of free speech in America. A good measure of the health of any democracy, especially American democracy, is the percentage of people who actually feel free to say what they actually think in public. And right now, I am sorry to say that we are doing abysmally on that metric. According to a recent survey conducted by the Cato Institute, over 60% of Americans, an overwhelming majority of this country, says they are afraid of saying what they believe because of the current political climate. That is not America. It is not the country that my parents came halfway across the world to join. It is not the country I learned to pledge allegiance to as a kid. We have a new red guard in our country that's reminiscent of the Chinese Cultural Revolution, except instead of adhering to Marxism, the new guiding principle for today's red guard is this new form of wokeism. So that's where we are today. In the name of diversity, we've sacrificed true diversity of thought. In the name of democracy, we've sacrificed our most important democratic norms of free speech and open debate. In the name of inclusion, we've created an exclusionary culture where certain views are just not welcome. So how did we get here? How did this new wokeism become so dominant in our country? The story goes back to the 1990s. A new discipline emerged in American academia. It was called critical race theory. It posited that race and other inherited characteristics created these invisible power structures that actually govern our real social relationships. In the 1890s, Karl Marx had posited that the invisible power relationships were based on economic disempowerment. But critical race theory changed that narrative. By the 1990s, critical race theory posited that the real culprit was invisible racial disempowerment. That's when wokeism was born. Now, to be clear, in the 90s, wokeism used to be about challenging the system. And there's something about that which I respect, even if I disagree with it. But today, wokeism is not about challenging the system. Wokeism is the system. So how did this fringe intellectual theory from unknown academics in the 1990s manage to infect our most important social institutions today? That is the question. And in my opinion, the answer actually begins with the 2008 financial crisis. Immediately after the '08 crisis, you'll remember, corporations were the bad guys. The old left used to say that corporate power was bad, and the thing we needed to do was redistribute money from rich people to help poor people. Agree or not, that was their theory. But the new modern woke left in the post-2008 world had a different theory. They said that the real problem wasn't poverty, it wasn't economic injustice, rather it was racial injustice and misogyny and bigotry. And guess what? That presented a once-in-a-generation opportunity for Wall Street. They could no longer be the bad guys, but instead could actually become the good guys just by adopting these woke values. Now, remember Occupy Wall Street. That was after 2008. That was a tough pill for Wall Street to swallow. But this wokeism stuff, that was easy. Applaud diversity and inclusion, put some women on boards, create an affinity group for analysts of color. You're good to go. Just look at what Goldman Sachs did last year when its CEO declared from, of course, the mountaintops of Davos that Goldman would not take a company public in the United States unless it met Goldman Sachs' standards for board diversity, where, of course, Goldman's the sole arbiter of who counts as diverse. The banks were thrilled to dance to this new woke tune. They were happy to lend both their money and their legitimacy and their credibility to this new woke movement. But they only need one thing in return, just one ask in return. Woke left, get the new left to leave Wall Street alone. And it worked. Each side won from the trade. Big banks got to use their market power to force these woke values down our throats. And in return, the new left agrees to look the other way when it comes to leaving their market power intact. So in a nutshell, here's how it worked. Wall Street got in bed with a bunch of woke millennials. Together, they birthed woke capitalism. And of course, they put Occupy Wall Street up for adoption. You don't even know what that is anymore. That's the Wall Street edition. As it turns out, there's a really similar backroom deal playing out in the other coast, in Silicon Valley as well. And here's the way it works over there. Woke activists demand that big tech censors political views that they don't like. And in return, the left agrees to leave big tech's monopoly power intact. And again, it is working masterfully for both sides. That is how this new arranged marriage works. This is not a marriage of love. This is more like mutual prostitution, and it is working. And the net result is the rise of America's newest Leviathan, the woke industrial complex. It is no longer just Wall Street. It is no longer just Silicon Valley. It is the entirety of corporate America as we know it. It's Coca-Cola training its employees on, quote unquote, how to be less white, and issuing public statements about voting laws that make it sound more like a super PAC than a soft drink manufacturer. It's United Airlines saying that it's going to apply a quota system based on race and gender to the pilots who are in the cockpit, even if that means throwing out pilot tests as a part of the process. It's Major League Baseball deciding to move this year's All-Star game out of Atlanta. It is Nike donating tens of millions of dollars to Black Lives Matter, a Marxist movement that professes to care about black lives, while it also calls for the decimation of the nuclear family structure. While, by the way, Nike, of course, continues to market $200 sneakers to black kids in the inner city who can't afford to buy books for school. Go figure. Liberals accept it because they love woke causes. Old school Republicans look the other way because their inner conscience tells them that the free market can do no wrong, without realizing that the so-called free market that they idealize doesn't actually exist today. So both sides are ultimately blinded to the rise of this new 21st century monster that is far more insidious and far more powerful than anything we have seen in the history of our country. Now, I would love to tell you that it doesn't get any worse than that, but it does. It does get worse. There's a new guest who's shown up on the scene and turned this unholy alliance into a threesome. That's the Communist Party of China. They understand this game more deeply than any of us. There is even a Chinese word for wokeness. Baizuo is the word. It literally refers to woke white people in the United States, and they use it to laugh at us. And even worse, they're using wokeism as a geopolitical tool to erode our standing on the global stage. And if you have any doubt about that, just look at what they're saying. Last year, when European Union leaders pressed Xi Jinping about China's human rights violations, including locking up over 1 million Uyghurs in concentration camps, who, by the way, Apple uses as slave labor to make their iPhones. I bet they don't tell you that. His first response was that Black Lives Matter shows that the United States is no better. Last month, when China's top diplomat came right here to the Alaska summit, in his opening remarks, he falsely asserts that the United States is slaughtering, that is his word, slaughtering Black Americans, and that he hopes the United States does better on human rights. That would be laughable if it didn't have such serious consequences. They know that our greatest geopolitical advantage is not our nuclear arsenal. It is our moral standing. But now they're using American capitalism as a weapon to accomplish their own goals by using woke corporations to undermine the United States from within. Take Disney. Just a couple of years ago, said it couldn't film in Georgia, in the state of Georgia, if they passed a new anti-abortion statute. Yet they just filmed Mulan last year in the Xinjiang province of China, which is literally ground zero, the epicenter of the Uyghur human rights crisis. And they didn't just film there. They went further. They said, we thank the local government. They thanked the CCP for allowing them to film there. That's Disney. The NBA, it's even worse. The NBA regularly decries alleged racial injustice here in the United States, yet it does not say a peep as they continue to expand into the Chinese market. It gets worse than that. When Daryl Morey, the general manager of the Houston Rockets, once tweeted, "Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong," LeBron James, one of the most outspoken critics of the last president, one of the most outspoken supporters of Black Lives Matter, just last week, tweeting a picture of a cop in Columbus, Ohio, and saying, hold him accountable. He's the guy who immediately came, of course, to China's public defense. This two-faced behavior of corporations and their celebrity cronies is not just an accident. It is by design. The CCP is playing us like a Chinese mandolin, and it's working, and they're doing it by using our own companies against us. And why are these companies doing it? The answer is plain and simple.
It's another sad moment in our country's history. The 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump, has yet again been indicted by the Biden DOJ, a political party in power that is now repeatedly using police force to indict and arrest and potentially eliminate its political opponents from competition. This is a politicized prosecution. It is a political persecution through prosecution, now in a third indictment just in a matter of months against the person who is still at present the lead contender in the Republican primary for U.S. president. I want to be very clear. I am running for U.S. president in that same Republican primary. It would be easier for me if Donald Trump were eliminated from competition. That's not how I want to win. This is not about politics to me. This is about first principles. We do not want to become a country where the party in power is able to use banana republic-like tactics to eliminate its political opponents. Yet I'm sad to say that's exactly where we are. The allegations in this indictment fall flat. It is wrong and incorrect and inaccurate to place blame for what happened on January 6th at the feet of Donald Trump. I said this at the time. I've said it ever since then. I continue to say it today. I would not have made the same judgments that Donald Trump did in how he handled that day. But that's different from saying that he committed a crime. He did not. He specifically told the protesters that day to behave peacefully. The First Amendment in this country gives political protesters the ability to express themselves and their opinions freely. Donald Trump was not responsible for what happened on January 6th. You want to know what was responsible? I said this in the days after January 6, 2021, just as I say it today. Systematic, pervasive censorship in this country. That was after a year where we had told people across this nation that you had to stay locked down in your house, in your basement, and shut up, sit down, do as you're told. If you question that, you're racist, you're anti-science. Your social media accounts were silenced. You had to stay home and lock down unless you were part of BLM or Antifa, in which case it was perfectly fine to roam the streets of this country and burn many of them down.
That was the double standard that then applied and said that if you said the virus originated in a lab in Wuhan, you were again a racist and had your internet accounts shut down. You were then told you had an election where you could express yourself to put the right person in charge of fixing these problems, and instead, your accounts were suppressed if you sent a mere message saying that the Hunter Biden laptop story from the New York Post was real. You had your accounts locked. Even the New York Post had its own account locked. And if you repeatedly then tell people they cannot speak, that is when they scream. If you repeatedly tell people they cannot scream, that is when they tear things down. And I think we are making a grave mistake in this country by trying to pin the blame for that at the feet of one man. If we refuse to learn our mistakes from our mistakes in the past, we are doomed to suffer an even worse fate in the future. I worry that will create a country where January 6, 2021 was a friendly parlay compared to what's actually to come. I'm running for president to make sure we don't march towards some kind of national divorce. But the first and most important step that we as candidates can take in this race is to speak and speak forcefully on the side of principle, to say that even if we're competing against Donald Trump, as I am, I do not want to see him eliminated from competition using these politicized tactics. It is wrong for our country. It is wrong for our future. I call on my fellow candidates to condemn it, and I call on President Biden to do the right thing and drop these politicized charges. That's going to be a first step towards uniting our country.
How do you plan to win over the diehard Trump supporters?
Well, it starts by being helpful that I was one, and in many ways I stand by it. But I'll tell you this, the America First agenda, and I think most of the diehard Trump supporters are really diehard America supporters. America First does not belong to one man. It does not belong to Trump. It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to you, the people of this country. So the question you have to ask is, this movement belongs to we the people. It's bigger than any of us. It's bigger than Trump. It's bigger than me. Bigger than any one of us. I'm a George Washington America First conservative, actually.